insensitive to meter in the same way that A music is specifically insensitive to pitch?
Question there about, is there examples of people with what we might call dysmetria or dysrhythmia?
Yes, although this is a lot rarer because there seems to be representation of rhythm in many different places in the brain, both in the cortex and subcortex. But one, I can't pronounce his name properly, but K. Guevara, in the motorcycle diaries, he records that he cannot get any dance with them, and that if there's a tango, he will dance a mambo, or I don't know what any of these dances are, but he get the rhythm wrong. At another level, one might say that people with Parkinson's and similar problems can't generate rhythm. Parkinson's has sometimes been called a kinetic stutter. Incidentally, stuttering is hugely helped by singing or incantation. And it is very difficult sometimes for people with Parkinson's to keep a rhythm. And if you ask them, say, to do this, they may accelerate incontinently and not know it. And music in this way can give them a rhythm they can't generate for themselves. But in general, rhythm deafness, if you want to put it that way, is much rarer than tone deafness.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, are you aware some of the stuff done in France overlaps most interestingly with some of your stuff? And I wonder, have you any contact with France Schott-Billmann, for instance? She's a dance therapist, originally a neurologist, but doing stuff that would feed most interestingly into what you do, but it's not exactly the same position. For instance, she's worked out had great success with psychotics and autistic kids with dance, and she's found, of course, that the synapses open up between the left and right brain in dance, so we become whole, we become unified. And it's just, and Resnikov, those two people, I wonder if you'd come across their work, because it would feed most interestingly and amplify what you're doing. And one last thing, do you know that an Irish author, our main playwright, wrote a famous play that based on your book about the man who thought his wife was an umbrella? Brian Friel, he's written the most wonderful play on in Broadway many times called Molly Sweeney. Did you know that?
Yes.
Did you?
Okay, so the first question was, there's some work, similar sort of work along the lines of dance therapy by some researchers in France. And the question was, do you think that works in a similar way to how we were talking about music therapy?
Yes, I would think so very much. In fact, something I heard about too late to include in the book was a group in Venezuela for dance therapy for people with Down syndrome, who are often very clumsy and uncouth in movement, but they can become very graceful and completely in the zone with it, with music.
Yeah, she's done a lot of work with Down syndrome people. Yeah.
Sorry?
Yes, the person who he's referring to has done a lot of work with Down syndrome and autism as well.
Yeah, and I think one can see similar powers with autism. We haven't spoken much about the affective, and intellectual attractions of music, but some years ago I was on a ward with a lot of disturbed autistic youngsters, and I could often make no contact with them except through music. And I felt this so strongly that I gave my own piano, an old upright piano then, to the hospital. Interestingly, with Stephen Wiltshire, the autistic savant whom I've written about, when he was a teenager, he developed a crush on Stevie Wonder, and did the most amazing singing and, in a way, mimesis of Stevie Wonder. He would hold a microphone, he would gesture to a huge audience, and I remember writing in my notebook that I saw this, autism disappears, exclamation mark. But then as soon as the music was over, he was sort of ticking and his gaze was off but I think movement and dance are tremendously important. Well, I'm happy to be here all night.
One more question.
You were speaking about rhythm as a primal organizing force. I was wondering what mechanisms you imagine for coupling between people because of rhythm.
I suspect one has to think in terms of unconscious mirroring and possibly what are now the mirror neurons, which are now described, which really I think form the physiological basis of empathy and sympathy, or certainly of some forms of empathy and sympathy, so that rhythm is contagious, like yawning. Well, that's, no, not like yawning. But rhythm is contagious in a much better way, and it's very difficult to hold oneself aloof. I once took a patient of mine to a Grateful Dead concert, and I'm not a Grateful Dead fan, but when 15,000 people were in sync, I could not join in. I had no choice, it was the mirror neurons.
Okay, so from Bach to the Grateful Dead, please join me in thanking Oliver for sharing his insights with us on music.
On behalf of myself, I'd just like to add my thanks to Laura and of course Oliver for coming to the proceedings to UCL. It's been a real privilege. Secondly, Oliver will be signing books on the lower ground floor as soon as we finish, but if I could ask you all to leave through the main doors and queue down the stairs.